The billionaire's dog guarded his grave, until a mysterious woman appeared at midnight. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. They said the dog never left his master's grave. Rain, snow, or sun, the loyal creature stood guard as if waiting for someone who would never return. It was close to midnight in a quiet cemetery on the edge of New York City. The fog was thick, wrapping around the headstones like a ghostly blanket. Streetlights flickered far away, too weak to reach the marble path that led to the grave of Dorian Marchmont, the billionaire everyone once admired and then quickly forgot. His name was carved deep into the granite, his legacy buried beneath rumors of betrayal and corruption. Beside that grave lay Argos, a German shepherd with matted fur and tired eyes. His ribs showed through his coat, but his loyalty never thinned. For 6 long months, Argos had stayed there through cold rain, through nights of thunder. Locals said he howled whenever anyone tried to come close, as if protecting a secret too painful to tell. That night, the wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and wildflowers. The dog's ears twitched. A pair of headlights appeared at the cemetery gate, then slowly dimmed. A woman stepped out of the car, her coat pulled tight against the chill. Her name was Amara Villanueva. Amara moved with quiet hesitation, her boots sinking slightly into the damp ground. In her arms, she carried a small bundle wrapped in linen wildflowers, violet and white, bound with twine. She had received an anonymous message 3 days earlier. Restore the Marchmont Memorial. Midnight is safest. The signature had sent a shiver through her Dorian M. Now, standing before the grave, she wondered if this was a cruel joke. The world believed Dorian Marchmont had died a thief, his reputation shattered by allegations of embezzling millions from his own charity foundation. But Amara did not believe everything she read. She knew something about loss, about rumors that twist the truth until it no longer looks human. The dog rose slowly, his breath visible in the cold air. A deep growl rolled from his chest, low and uncertain. Amara froze. She met his eyes full of grief, not rage. She crouched down, keeping her voice soft. "It is all right, boy," she whispered. "I was sent by him." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Argos stepped closer, sniffed her hand, and pressed his head gently against her palm. Amara exhaled, her heartbeat easing. She knelt beside the grave, brushing fallen leaves away from the engraved name. "Dorian Marchmont," she murmured, "what did they do to you?" A gust of wind swept through the trees, scattering petals across the headstone. The city felt miles away. Only the ticking of her watch and the dog's slow breathing filled the silence. She placed the flowers at the base of the grave. The scent of damp soil mixed with the faint sweetness of clover. "I do not know why I came," she admitted softly. "Maybe because someone had to." Argos lay down beside her, his body pressed to the cold stone as if keeping it warm. Somewhere in the distance, a clock struck 12. The woman looked up at the night sky, where clouds moved like dark waves. For the first time, she noticed faint scratches on the marble letters she had not seen before. Leaning closer, she traced them with her fingertips. The words were small, almost hidden. "Justice begins where fear ends." Amara shivered. She did not yet understand what the message meant, but something deep inside told her this was only the beginning. And as the rain began to fall again, the billionaire's dog did not move away. He simply stayed, guarding the woman now, as if his watch had finally found a new purpose. The next morning came gray and quiet. The city outside the cemetery woke up to another ordinary day. But inside those iron gates, time felt paused. The air smelled of wet earth and fading flowers. Argos was still there, lying near the grave, his eyes half open, his breathing calm. Amara stood a few feet away, holding a cup of coffee she had bought from a street vendor on her way back. She had not planned to return. She had promised herself that last night was only curiosity, nothing more. Yet something about the message she had received and the strange peace she had felt near the grave would not leave her mind. She glanced down at her phone again. The anonymous email was still there in her inbox, marked unread as if to test her sanity. The sender's name glowed in bold letters, Dorian M. The message was brief, polite, and oddly personal. "You restore what others abandon. I need you to restore something of mine. The Marchmont Memorial. Midnight is safest. It had been sent 1 week ago, but Dorian Marchmont had been dead for 6 months. Amara ran her fingers through her hair, exhaling slowly. Maybe it was a cruel prank, or maybe some assistant of his was still managing unfinished business. Still, why her? She was a preservation architect who specialized in restoring historic landmarks and memorials, not a private investigator. And yet, she could not forget that sentence carved into the marble: "Justice begins where fear ends." Her phone buzzed again, snapping her out of thought. A message from her landlord reminded her that rent was overdue. She sighed, stuffed the phone in her pocket, and looked at the grave once more. "I guess I will take the job," she whispered to herself. "Even if I do not understand who hired me." Argos lifted his head, as if he understood. His tail thumped weakly against the ground. Later that day, Amara drove to the Marchmont Foundation's old building in downtown Manhattan. The tall glass structure looked lifeless now. A for-lease sign hung crooked near the entrance. Through the dusty windows, she could see office chairs stacked in corners, boxes half-packed, and old newspaper clippings still pinned to the wall. She found a security guard sitting by the door, an older man with a kind but cautious face. "Excuse me," she said. "I was hired to work on Mr. Marchmont's memorial restoration. I am trying to confirm a few details." The guard frowned. "You mean Dorian Marchmont?" "Lady, that man's been gone half a year. Place has been closed ever since." "I understand," she said gently. "Do you know if there is still someone managing his personal estate?" He rubbed his chin. His CFO, Victor Haynes, handled everything after the accident. Not the friendliest type. You might find him at the corporate offices uptown. "Thank you," she replied. "Do you remember a German shepherd?" "His dog?" The man's eyes softened. "Argos? Yeah, they were inseparable. After the crash, the dog ran off. No one could catch him. Guess he went back to the boss's grave, huh?" Amara nodded. He did. When she left the building, the afternoon sky was turning pale blue. She stopped by a small cafe nearby and opened her laptop. She searched Dorian's name, reading through articles filled with speculation, embezzlement, betrayal, greed. Every story painted him as a fallen hero, a man who had built a charity empire only to destroy it. But something about those stories felt too clean, too one-sided. The Foundation's mission had been to rescue abandoned animals and provide shelter for families in crisis. That did not sound like the work of a thief. As she closed the laptop, she noticed the same wildflowers from last night lying in the passenger seat. They still carried a faint scent, soft and honest. Back at the cemetery that evening, she began clearing weeds around the grave. The sun had set, and the wind grew colder. Argos appeared from the shadows, carrying something in his mouth, a small metal object covered in dirt. Amara knelt down as the dog dropped it at her feet. It was an old digital recorder, scratched but intact. She wiped off the mud and pressed the play button. A burst of static filled the air, followed by a man's voice, steady, low, unmistakably human. "If you are hearing this, something went wrong. The truth is in the vault, under the Foundation's name. Protect the project, not the headlines." Amara froze. The voice was Dorian Marchmont's. The dog sat beside her, watching. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "Dorian, what happened to you?" For the first time, she realized this was no prank. Someone wanted her to find the truth. And somewhere between the living and the dead, Dorian Marchmont's story was waiting to be told. The storm rolled in without warning that night. The wind howled through the cemetery gates, bending the trees until they groaned like old bones. Rain began to pour, soaking the ground where Amara knelt beside Dorian Marchmont's grave. She had come back with tools, ready to clean the marble and document the strange carving she had found, but now she could hardly see through the sheets of rain. Argos barked sharply, pacing in circles. The dog seemed anxious, restless, as if trying to warn her of something. Thunder cracked overhead, and lightning flashed white across the sky, throwing quick bursts of light over the grave. The world looked like a flickering film reel, frame by frame, and for an instant Amara thought she saw a figure standing near the fence. She blinked, but there was no one there, only rain and darkness. "Easy, Argos," she said softly, though her voice trembled. "It is just the storm." The dog barked again and bolted toward the edge of the cemetery, his paws splashing through puddles. Amara rose to follow, slipping on the wet grass. She caught her balance against the headstone and realized the earth near the base had shifted. A piece of stone had come loose, revealing a small hollow space underneath. She hesitated, then reached inside. Her fingers brushed something metallic, She pulled it out, a rusted key, long and old, with a small engraving at the top that read vault. Before she could think further, a deafening crash split the air. A heavy oak branch, torn loose by the storm, came down hard behind her. The impact threw her backward, the key flying from her hand. Pain shot through her leg as a smaller branch pinned her knee to the ground. She gasped, struggling to move. The rain poured harder, blurring her vision. "Help!" she called out instinctively, though no one could hear her over the thunder. But Argos heard. The dog came racing back, barking furiously. He bit and pulled at the branch, digging with his paws to free her leg. Mud and rain splattered across her face as she tried to push herself up. Finally, the branch gave way. Amara stumbled to her feet, wincing in pain. She dropped to her knees again, wrapping her arms around the dog's wet fur. "You saved me," she whispered. "You really saved me." Argos whined softly and pressed his head against her shoulder, his entire body trembling from the cold. She looked around for the key, but the storm had swallowed it into the mud. Exhaustion settled into her bones. Her jeans were torn, her palms scraped raw. The night felt endless. Gathering what strength she had left, she half-limped, half-walked back to her car parked by the cemetery gate. Argos followed close behind. She opened the door, motioned for him to get in, and collapsed in the driver's seat. The smell of wet dog filled the air, earthy and oddly comforting. Rain drummed against the windshield like 1,000 fingertips. She turned on the engine, letting the heater hum softly. Argos curled on the passenger seat, eyes closing, his breathing slowing. Amara sat in silence, staring at the recorder still lying on the dashboard. The words echoed in her mind. "The truth is in the vault." She thought of the key, now buried somewhere beneath the grave, and of the signature on that strange email. None of it made sense, and yet it all fit together in a way she could not explain. Outside, the storm began to fade. The lightning softened to a distant glow behind the clouds. The cemetery, barely visible through the fogged glass, looked still again, almost peaceful. Amara leaned back, whispering into the quiet, "Dorian, what were you trying to tell me?" At that moment, Argos stirred. His ears perked up, his eyes turning toward the grave in the distance. Amara followed his gaze. Through the mist, she could just make out the marble statue, its outline glowing faintly in the headlights. The words engraved at its base shimmered with rainwater. "Justice begins where fear ends." A strange calm filled her chest. It was not comfort, but clarity. She knew what she had to do next. "Tomorrow," she said softly to the sleeping dog, "we find that vault." The rain slowed to a steady drizzle. The clock on her dashboard read 12:47 a.m. The city beyond the hills was asleep, but for Amara, the night had just begun. The following morning, the world felt clean again. The storm had washed the city streets until they gleamed, and the air carried that sharp scent of rain-soaked pavement. Amara woke in her apartment with her clothes still damp from the night before. Her leg ached where the branch had struck her, but the pain only reminded her that she was alive and that something bigger than herself had started at that grave. Argos slept near the door, curled up on an old blanket she had laid out for him. When she stirred, the dog lifted his head and wagged his tail once, slow and loyal. "Good morning, hero," she said softly, crouching to scratch behind his ears. "Today we find the vault." By noon, she was back on the road, the city's skyline fading behind her as she drove toward the Marchmont Foundation's headquarters in the Upper District. The building was tall, glass and steel catching the sunlight, but its entrance was sealed off by a metal chain. A sign read "Property of Haynes Financial Holdings." She knew that name. Victor Haynes, the CFO, mentioned by the security guard. Amara parked across the street, thinking. She was not the kind of person who broke rules, but rules had not saved Dorian Marchmont. She got out, clutching the small digital recorder in one hand. If Dorian's message was true, there had to be a vault somewhere inside. The side gate of the building hung slightly open, broken from the windstorm. She slipped through, her boots splashing through shallow puddles. Inside, the air was heavy with dust. Desks were empty, papers scattered. The foundation sign still hung in the lobby, its letters tarnished with time. Amara's flashlight beam caught on something on the far wall, an oil painting of Dorian with Argos at his side. The plaque beneath it read, "Integrity is the last wealth worth keeping." Her chest tightened. This man had built a legacy of compassion and somehow died branded as a thief. Following the corridor, she found a staircase leading down to the basement. Each step creaked under her weight. The air grew cooler. A faint hum echoed from below, the sound of old machinery still running somewhere. When she reached the bottom, Her flashlight flickered across a steel door with a biometric lock. On the handle, faintly visible under dust, was the same word she had seen engraved on the key: Vault. She tried the keypad. The screen blinked awake and displayed a message: Voice authorization required. Her pulse quickened. Without thinking, she held up the recorder and pressed play. If you are hearing this, something went wrong. The truth is in the vault under the Foundation's name. The system beeped once, paused, then flashed green. Access granted. The door released with a hiss. Inside was a small archive room lined with safety boxes, drives, and file cabinets. A faint scent of mold and paper filled the air. She moved slowly, scanning the labels until one caught her attention: Project Argos. The folder inside contained transaction records, email copies, and photos of Dorian with rescue animals, shelter volunteers, and charity partners. At the back, a set of internal memos detailed suspicious wire transfers money rerouted through accounts linked to Victor Haynes. Dorian had discovered it weeks before his death. Amara's heart pounded. He knew, she whispered. He tried to expose him. A faint metallic click made her freeze. Someone else was in the building. She turned off the flashlight, her breath shallow. From the stairwell came footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing off the concrete walls. She pressed herself behind a filing cabinet, clutching the recorder. A man's voice called out, calm and low: Whoever is down here, you are trespassing on private property. Victor Haynes. She recognized the tone from interviews she had watched online: smooth, composed, dangerous. Her hand tightened on the recorder. She waited, heart pounding, as his footsteps moved closer, the beam of his flashlight sweeping across the room. You should not have come here, he said. That man ruined himself. Do not make the same mistake. Amara stayed silent, every nerve on edge. The dog upstairs barked once, sharp and echoing. Victor turned toward the sound. In that moment, Amara slipped out through the opposite door and ran. Rain began again as she reached the street, breath ragged, clutching the folder under her coat. She jumped into her car, Argos leaping in beside her. As she pulled away, Victor's figure appeared in the doorway, lit by a flash of lightning. Amara whispered to herself, You tried to bury him, but he left a trail. Outside, thunder rolled once more across the city. The storm had returned, but this time, she was ready to fight through it. By the time dawn broke, Amara had not slept. The sky was streaked with the pale orange of early morning, but her hands still trembled from the adrenaline of the night before. She had driven until the city lights disappeared in her rearview mirror and parked beside the Hudson River, where the air was sharp and clean. Argos sat quietly beside her in the passenger seat, watching her as if he knew what she was thinking. The folder lay open across her lap, its contents spread out in a mix of papers, photographs, and flash drives. Every page told a story that the world had never heard: proof that Dorian Marchmont had not stolen from his charity, but had uncovered a financial crime that cost him his life. She flipped through the last few pages, her heart tightening at a series of printed emails between Dorian and Victor Haynes. In one, Dorian had written, If I turn this evidence over to the board, it will destroy everything, but silence would destroy what we stand for. The message had been sent just one day before his car crashed on the bridge. Amara looked out at the water, whispering, He tried to do the right thing. She pulled out her phone and took photos of each document. She did not know whom she could trust, but she knew she needed to make this public. Still, her instincts told her to be careful. Victor had been there last night. He knew someone had opened the vault. Argos shifted, ears twitching at the sound of an approaching car. Amara straightened, gripping the folder. A white sedan pulled up behind her, headlights flashing once. For a tense moment, she thought it might be Haynes again, but a familiar voice called out from the driver's seat. Amara Villanueva. She turned and saw a woman stepping out of the car holding a police badge. Detective Lena Brooks, Manhattan Police Department. You left a voicemail about evidence tied to the Marchmont case? Amara nodded slowly, relief mixing with suspicion. Yes. I found documents in the Marchmont Foundation's basement. They show Victor Haynes diverted millions of dollars. Dorian tried to expose it before he died. The detective's expression hardened. We have been chasing rumors about Haynes for months, but no solid proof. If you really have this, you need to come with me. It will be safer than staying here. Amara hesitated, glancing at Argos. The dog growled softly, his fur rising. Something in her gut told her to keep control of the evidence. Detective, she said calmly, I will meet you at the precinct. But first, I need to make copies of everything. I cannot let this disappear again. The detective studied her for a moment, then nodded. Do it fast. People like Haynes have friends in powerful places. Went. After Lena left, Amara drove to a small print shop that opened early for commuters. She scanned every page, saved digital copies on 3 different drives, and mailed one to her attorney friend in Chicago with no return address. Only then did she breathe easier. By mid-afternoon, she arrived at the precinct with Argos waiting patiently in her car. Detective Brooks met her at the entrance, guiding her through the process of handing over the evidence. The detective flipped through the folder slowly, her face unreadable. This is enough to open a full investigation, Lena said at last. If this holds up, Haynes will not just lose his company, he will face prison. Amara exhaled in relief. Then Dorian's name can finally be cleared. The detective gave her a small, tired smile. You did what the rest of us could not. You followed the truth when everyone else stopped looking. Outside, the sky had turned gray again. A light drizzle began to fall as Amara walked back to her car. Argos lifted his head, tail wagging softly. She sat beside him, staring through the windshield at the endless line of traffic ahead. You were right to stay by him, she whispered, resting her hand on the dog's back. You kept his promise alive. As the first real drops of rain began to fall, Amara started the car and headed toward the Marchmont Memorial once more. The world might never fully understand what had happened to Dorian Marchmont, but she would make sure his story did not end in silence. Behind her, in an office high above the city, Victor Haynes stared at a news alert flashing across his computer screen. Police reopen Marchmont case after new evidence emerges. His hands tightened around his coffee mug. So, he muttered under his breath, someone finally found the vault. He turned toward the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. The game had changed, and he knew it. But so did Amara, and for the first time, she was not afraid of what waited ahead. That night, the rain returned to the city. It was not the violent storm of before, but a slow, steady rain that blurred the glow of traffic lights and made the world feel quieter. Amara parked her car outside the cemetery gate, watching through the windshield as droplets slid down the glass. Argos rested his head on her lap, calm now, his breathing even. She had just come from the precinct. Detective Lena Brooks had promised to keep her informed, but the system would take time. Evidence needed to be verified, witnesses questioned, and warrants approved. For the first time since she had received that strange message, Amara had nothing left to do but wait. Yet waiting had never been easy for her. She stepped out of the car, umbrella in hand, and walked toward the Marchmont grave. The grass was slick under her boots, and the air smelled faintly of rain and old stone. The marble was clean now. The weeds she had cleared days ago had not yet returned. The flowers she had placed at the base were fading, but still there, their colors muted in the dim light. Argos followed her closely, his fur glistening in the rain. He stopped near the grave, sniffed the ground, and then sat, facing the headstone like a loyal guard once more. Amara knelt beside him, tracing the carved words again with her fingers. "Justice begins where fear ends," she read quietly. "You wrote that, did you not, Dorian? You believed it until the very end." She took out the recorder she had carried since the night she found it. Its casing was scratched, but the small red light still worked. She pressed play, expecting the same message she had heard before. "If you are hearing this, something went wrong. The truth is in the vault under the Foundation's name. Protect the project, not the headlines." The voice filled the silence around her, steady and warm even through static. But then, just as she was about to stop the recording, a second sound followed, a faint exhale, almost a sigh, and then a sentence she had never heard before. "If no one believes me, that is fine. But if one person does, keep building what matters." Amara froze. The message had more than one recording. The last line had been hidden behind the noise. She stared at the device, her eyes stinging with tears she had not expected. "I believe you," she whispered. "I do." Argos lifted his head at her voice, as if recognizing the truth in it. For a moment, Amara felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. The sound of the rain softened, and the world seemed to breathe slower. She was alone, but not lonely. It was as though Dorian's voice had crossed the distance between life and memory to thank her. She sat there for a long time, letting the rain soak into her coat. Thoughts drifted through her mind: the scandal, the investigation, the man whose kindness had built a foundation for others. His story had been twisted, but it would not stay buried. Not anymore. A car passed in the distance, its headlights cutting briefly through the dark before fading. She stood, brushed the water from her hands, and looked at the city skyline beyond the trees. Somewhere out there, people were talking about Dorian Marchmont again this time, not as a villain, but as a man wronged. She turned to Argos. "You can rest soon," she said softly. "We are almost there." The dog wagged his tail, stood up, and began walking beside her toward the car. Before she opened the door, she looked back at the grave one more time. A single beam of moonlight broke through the clouds, touching the marble just long enough to make the engraved letters glisten like silver. It felt like a sign, but she did not call it that. Amara did not believe in miracles. She believed in persistence. She whispered, "Tomorrow, I tell the world." Then she got into the car, started the engine, and drove toward the city, the dog resting quietly beside her. Behind them, the rain continued to fall, but for the first time, the cemetery did not look mournful. It looked at peace. The next morning broke bright and cold. The storm had passed for good this time, leaving the sky clear and washed blue. The streets buzzed with noise, news vans lining the sidewalks outside the Marchmont Foundation building. Reporters shouted over one another, microphones lifted high, their words blending into a storm of questions. Amara stood across the street, a scarf pulled tight around her neck, watching as detectives escorted Victor Haynes out of the building in handcuffs. His face was pale, his eyes hard and defiant. Cameras flashed in bursts of light, capturing the moment the world had waited for. Detective Lena Brooks stepped forward to speak to the press. "After a thorough investigation," she said firmly, "we have confirmed that Mr. Victor Haynes embezzled over $25 million from the Marchmont Foundation. Mr. Dorian Marchmont uncovered the crime and was silenced before he could expose it. Today, we are correcting that wrong." Her voice echoed through the air, steady and unshakable. The crowd murmured in disbelief, then applause rippled among them. Amara's heart pounded as she listened. The truth was out. Dorian's name had finally been cleared. She felt tears fill her eyes but blinked them away, unwilling to let the world see her cry. Argos sat beside her, his fur glinting under the sunlight, his gaze fixed on the building. When the reporters dispersed, Lena crossed the street and joined Amara. "You did it," the detective said quietly. "Without your persistence, this story would have stayed buried forever." Amara shook her head. "He did it. Dorian left every clue I needed. I only followed his trail." Lena smiled faintly. "Then you both did it." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the police cars pull away. The flashing lights faded down the avenue, leaving only the hum of traffic behind. Later that afternoon, Amara drove back to the Marchmont Cemetery. The sun hung low, painting the stone markers gold. She carried a small bouquet of fresh wildflowers in one hand and the digital recorder in the other. Argos walked at her side, tail swaying gently. At the grave, she placed the flowers where the old ones had wilted. "It is done," she said softly. "They know the truth now. You can rest." The dog lay down beside the grave, his head resting near the base of the stone. Amara sat next to him, setting the recorder on the marble surface. She pressed play one last time. Dorian's voice filled the air. "If no one believes me, that is fine. But if one person does, keep building what matters." Amara smiled through her tears. "I will," she whispered. A gentle wind passed through the trees, carrying with it the scent of wet grass and fading rain. The world seemed to exhale, as if relieved. For the first time since the night she arrived, the cemetery felt alive, not haunted, but renewed. Argos closed his eyes, breathing softly, finally at peace. And in that moment, Amara realized something simple and true. Justice was never about revenge. It was about remembering. A full year passed after the day Victor Haynes was arrested. The city had moved on, as cities always do. But the name Dorian Marchmont had found its way back into headlines this time for the right reasons. His foundation had been restored, his reputation cleared, and his story had become a lesson told in business schools and news columns alike. Amara stood once again at the same hill overlooking the Marchmont Cemetery, but the view was different now. Where overgrown weeds had once tangled around broken stone, a garden stretched wide, a haven of green paths and bright colors. It was called the Marchmont Sanctuary, and today it would open to the public for the first time. Volunteers moved through the garden, placing final touches on signs and benches. The air smelled of lilies and cedar mulch, and the sound of distant laughter carried from the entryway. What had once been a place of sorrow now thrived as a symbol of renewal. Amara walked slowly down the gravel path, Argos trotting faithfully at her side. The dog was older now, his fur grayer around the muzzle, but his spirit was the same. Everyone in the city knew his story, the dog who had guarded a grave until truth returned. People called him the Keeper of Marchmont. At the heart of the garden stood a bronze statue of Dorian Marchmont. He was depicted not as a businessman in a suit, but as a man kneeling to pet a dog, smiling in quiet kindness. The sculptor had captured something real in his expression, dignity mixed with peace. At the base of the statue, engraved in gold, were the words, "Integrity outlives every rumor." Amara placed a bouquet of wildflowers beneath it, the same kind she had carried on that first night. She felt Argos sit beside her, his head resting against her knee. "Do you see this, Dorian?" she said softly. "You built something that never truly died." Jokwe. A small crowd gathered near the gate as Detective Lena Brooks stepped forward to speak. Her voice carried over the wind. "This garden represents what justice can create when it is fueled by truth and compassion. The Marchmont Sanctuary will provide space for rescued animals and for artists who have nowhere else to work. It is the future Dorian Marchmont imagined." Applause spread through the crowd. Amara stayed back, letting others take the spotlight. She did not want recognition. She only wanted the promise to continue. As people began to walk the paths, Argos wandered toward a patch of sunlight near the statue. He lay down there, eyes half closed, tail thumping once against the grass. For a moment, Amara thought she heard the faint sound of Dorian's voice, the same calm tone from the recording. But she did not turn around. Some memories were meant to stay unseen, living only in the heart. She looked up at the sky, now golden with evening light. The garden shimmered under the warmth of the sun, and the air felt lighter, freer. "This is what matters," she whispered. And for the first time, the name Marchmont no longer carried tragedy, it carried peace. As the sun sank lower behind the skyline, the Marchmont Sanctuary glowed in soft amber light. The grand opening had ended hours ago, and most of the guests had already left. Only the rustle of leaves and the faint hum of cicadas filled the evening air. Amara lingered by the statue, her coat draped loosely over her shoulders. The day had been long, but her heart felt calm in a way it had not in years. Argos rested near her feet, his eyes closed, his breathing slow. The old dog had spent the entire afternoon greeting visitors, allowing children to pet his fur, and basking in the attention of people who now understood his story. He had become a living symbol of loyalty, the one who had never stopped believing that his master would be remembered with honor. Amara sat on the edge of a stone bench facing Dorian's statue. In her hands, she held the same small recorder that had guided her through the journey. The casing was worn smooth now, but it still worked. She pressed the play button one last time. "If no one believes me, that is fine. But if one person does, keep building what matters. Come on, Drew." The voice filled the quiet space between the trees. It no longer sounded like a message from the past. It sounded like a conversation. Amara took a deep breath. "You were right, Dorian," she said softly. "Building what matters was never about money. It was about people who keep showing up, even when no one else does." Her voice trembled, not with grief, but with gratitude. She placed the recorder on the base of the statue beside the fresh flowers. Then she added a new one of her own, a small silver device engraved with her initials. Pressing record, she spoke clearly, her tone steady and warm. "For whoever finds this years from now, know that truth takes time, but it always rises. The Marchmont Sanctuary stands as proof of that. Justice is not about punishment, it is about remembrance. And sometimes, one act of kindness can outlive a lifetime of power." She ended the recording and smiled. The two recorders sat side by side, one from the past, one from the present. A story completed. Argos stirred, lifted his head, and looked toward the gate. The last light of day slipped through the trees, brushing the bronze statue with gold. For a moment it looked as though Dorian's figure was smiling. Amara rose, brushing the dust from her hands. "Come on, old friend," she whispered. "Time to go home." Amu. As they walked toward the gate, the camera of the world could almost see the scene in stillness. The woman and the dog framed against a sky painted with twilight. Behind them, the wind swept gently across the garden, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers. The engraved words at the statue's base caught the last ray of sun. "Integrity outlives every rumor." And in that moment, the Marchmont Sanctuary stood quiet and eternal, proof that some legacies do not fade. They simply keep breathing through those brave enough to continue them. The world beyond the gates carried on, but in this place, peace remained. The dog lay down by the path, his eyes following Amara until she disappeared into the fading light, his watch finally over, his duty complete.